I see a little red button up at the top.
Right. We are live.
I'm trying to get rid of this box at the left.
Okay, it's not showing up on mine, so
it doesn't matter then. Okay,
should be good then. And we will edit out the beginning, so we'll be good.
All right.
Good. So I'm going to go ahead and begin, and then we'll see where we go.
Okay, sounds good. And I did glance quickly at your questions. They all look, as I said, like something I'm perfectly comfortable talking about, so I don't need a lot of prep. So we'll see how we do.
Okay, great. Hi, I'm Erin Owen, and I am happy to be here with Louise Kursmark up in Boston. I'm in Philadelphia. Louise, let's kick off with you sharing a little bit about you, the work that you do in the world, and who you work with as your clients.
Sure. Well, I am an executive resume writer. I've been doing it for a very long time, and I've been specializing in executives only for probably 15 to 20 years. So all of my work involves creating marketing materials for executives in career transition. So that means great resumes, LinkedIn profiles, bios, and other marketing materials and messages. I love working with coaches like you, Erin, because I don't provide that service myself. So a lot of times it's a collaborative effort where we are working together to create the materials and the messages and the strategy to get executives out into the next opportunity.
Great. Recently, I've been hearing the words personal brand. And then when I dig into it, a lot of what I'm seeing relate to the materials that you help your clients create. Do you hear that word being used, personal brand, in the work that you do with clients?
I've certainly heard a lot about personal branding for quite some time. I am not a branding coach. I've done a little dabbling in it. Branding essentially is communicating what's unique about you. And of course, in a job search in career management, it's not just what's unique about you. It's what's unique and valuable about you as it relates to an employer. Because it's not just enough to have things that you care about. You have to present yourself with information, success stories, traits, and things that are going to be meaningful to employers. So I don't take an in-depth branding coaching process with clients, but I do work to uncover what it is that makes them unique and make sure that the content of their resume is specific to them and not, it could be used by many.
In terms of the kind of clients that I usually work with, they're mid and senior level leaders. A lot of them have been out of the job market because they've had longevity in their company, or they've been running their own company for a long time. They're really surprised by learning all the changes that are out there in the world. And since you do have that historical perspective with your work, what would you say are the biggest changes that they need to be prepared for as they re-enter the job market and get their materials together?
Well, two things really come to mind. One is something that you would help them with, which is the whole process of job search, because of course everything is online. Everything is we no longer mail letters and resumes to people, or at least rarely do so. So we have to contend with how to do that effectively. And also we don't want to fall into the trap of doing only that, or doing that to the exclusion of other things that are more valuable and, and more important. So the process and having it online is a change. And actually it's interesting because people think, oh, there's all these job boards, I'll just upload a resume and offers will come flooding in. And of course it doesn't work that way. And the good news is that plain old-fashioned networking is still our best approach, particularly for executives. I've been talking with a lot of them lately who said, oh, as I get higher up, there aren't that many opportunities. Of course, it's a pyramid. So at the top, there are fewer opportunities. So you really have to go after the jobs that you want and have a strategy and a message and a plan for getting them. So the job search has changed to some degree. But I think a bigger change that's come about in documents, two things. Number one, we have to have a LinkedIn profile. A resume itself is not enough, and the profile should not be identical to the resume. It's got to be different because it's a different medium, different audience. And then changes in how we read. We used to have more of a detailed and leisurely read, assuming that people were actually going to sit down and read a resume. But of course, now they don't. They skim. We need to write it and design it and present it in such a way that the good information is instantly visible, jumping off the page. There's enough depth so that it's rewarding to read it. But if we don't capture attention first and give them quick bites of information, we are very likely to lose our readers.
Mm-hmm. So when you are advising executives on how to update their materials, where do you begin in the process?
I always start with, I have a kind of a specific process that works well for me. Every resume writer has a little bit of a different process because our goal is to uncover the good material, get the good stuff, and then we can shape it into the new form. My process starts with a brief, usually a phone call to get acquainted, but then a brief questionnaire because I like to get a few facts on the table first so that we're starting literally on the same page with the approach. It is essential for me that the executive have a pretty clear picture on what he or she wants to do. I don't work with people who are open to every opportunity because without being specific, I can't choose what's most important to include on the resume. So they have to have a goal, and there's other questions that I ask that give me information that I find to be helpful and insightful. But it's not a lot of work. It's a short worksheet. And then we do a phone call, typically an hour or so, to dig into the information that's on the existing resume, to talk about context around careers, to uncover more insights into what that person loves to do, hates to do, wants to do next, the kinds of challenges that are most exciting. I want to get a sense for your personality, for what you've achieved, what you're proudest of, what you never want to talk about again, and then we won't include that. So there's lots of different information that I can gather through that interview process. And it's, for me, a very fast-moving, delightful, and interesting conversation. And I think my clients feel the same way.
Right. To what degree are you connected with or working with the world of recruiters, and how do those worlds of executive resume writer and recruiter work together for candidates?
I don't work closely with recruiters myself. I do have can advise clients on strategies for connecting with recruiters, and if they are working with recruiters, I can give them advice on how to handle that interaction. But I'm not involved in the job search process for the most part. So most of my job search advice to clients is fairly general. I'm happy to answer specific questions, but I'm not their guide at every step along the way. That's what they would be working with you for.
And how do you stay abreast of the latest trends, especially with technology developing so quickly?
Well, I like to stay connected to my tribe of resume writers and career coaches. I attend conferences, several every year. I write a lot of books on resume writing. So when I do that, of course, I have to research and make sure that what I'm writing is accurate. And then also I get input, submissions and other content from great resume writers. So that keeps me fresh in terms of my approaches and design and content and great ideas that I can kind of adapt for resumes that I'm writing. But mostly it's staying connected with my colleagues, taking advantage of webinars, classes myself, conferences I mentioned, doing a lot of reading online, and just, I love my world, so I enjoy keeping informed about it.
Wonderful. For example, if I had a client who really loved to do their own writing, but they were open to reading a book, which of your books would you say is the first book to start with?
Well, the one that we've written most recently would be the best one because, of course, things have changed, and that is called Modernize Your Resume. And we have literally just come out with the second edition of that. We wrote it 3 years ago, and then now a second edition, because a lot has changed in how we write, design, format, structure resumes in the last 5 to 10 years. And this book covers a lot of that ground and gives some really good examples of creative, solid, excellent resumes and strategies for writing your own resume.
And what's really different about an executive resume compared to a regular professional resume?
Well, not a lot in terms of, I think, to me, resume writing is the same for every single client. And by that, I mean my job is to gather all of their information about their career and then choose that which is most important. So what's different about executive resumes is what's most important given their goals. So oftentimes they are, I wouldn't say less detailed, but less technical in nature. We're not getting into the nitty gritty day-to-day job activities. We're talking about big themes. What were you hired to do? What was the challenge there? How much money did you make or save, or time did you save, or how did you improve things for the company, the customer, the employees? So I'm looking at more big picture achievements as opposed to getting lost in the weeds sometimes of the day-to-day, because number one, the day-to-day is typically not that interesting. And number two, in terms of inciting interest, it's not that important. You can always discuss those details in an interview, but for the resume, we want to focus on the big picture themes of what you've done. And the other difference, I think, would be language and visual presentation. You want it to look sharp, professional, and executive. I love using a little bit of color and the occasional graphic or chart, but I'm not going to create an over-the-top design or an infographic resume for an executive because it doesn't allow me to say enough about that person. So I want the design to support the message and not the design to be the message.
Makes sense. So if you consider all the different pieces of the executive portfolio, the resume, the LinkedIn profile, the bio, cover letters when they're still used, how would you describe the order?
For me, the resume is the foundational piece because that's the one that we're going to write first. I'm going to uncover all the material that I can about you, write that resume, and then use that as the foundation piece. Everything needs to go together. It should send the same message, but start with the resume, and then we can write the LinkedIn profile, write the cover letter, write the bio. I can do it in a different order, but I like to do the resume first because it's very structured. It's going to be a chronological story, and then I can decide for the other pieces, how do I want to play with that story? Do I want to present it in the same way or a different way? I don't want to start with a variety of structures and timelines and then have to integrate them into the other pieces. So I start with the structured resume.
Great. What do you see as the most important purpose of an executive bio?
Executive bios are fantastic to use when you are networking and when you don't want to send a job seeker message because a resume says, I'm looking for a job. And sometimes you want to have a business conversation with people, just see what's going on in your industry or what's happening at your company. What common challenges can we talk about? Those are the kinds of conversations that are very valuable and often do lead to job leads and opportunities. But you don't want to lead with the resume in those cases because, that's once again, sends the message that you're looking for a job.
Makes sense. Let me take a look at my questions and see what else we haven't yet covered. Sure. Okay. So when an executive is considering who to hire to write their resume, what questions should they be asking?
Well, I think one of the most important questions is not questions, but so much as to have a conversation. So talk with that person. Is there a connection? Because you're going to be working quite closely together. Do you like his or her style? On my website, when I was writing the copy for it, I tried to think about what makes me different from a lot of other resume writers because there are a lot of good ones out there. And I thought, well, what's really different about me is I am very direct. I'm to the point. I'm getting to the heart of the matter in your career and in my writing and in our communications. I know writers who spend, let's say, 3 hours on a consultation call. I spend typically an hour, as I mentioned, and I believe I get great information, exactly what I need in that hour. And if it goes a little longer, that's fine. But 3 hours on the phone would be exhausting for me, and I don't know that it would be any more valuable. But others feed on that interaction, that 3-hour program. So it just depends on what works for you and your writer. So fit is important. I would ask to look at samples or look on their website for samples because we can talk about being great at what we do, but the proof is in what we've done. It's the same thing for you as an executive in your job search. You can tell me how great you are, but if you don't have any results, I'm not going to believe you. So look at the samples. If they're all the same, I would be a little concerned visually and wording wise. That's not a good sign. And do you like the writing style? Do they speak to you? Do you get a sense for who that executive is, what that person has done, what the message is of that resume? You should be able to get a sense for the writer's style or approach. Certainly not a one style for everyone. And certifications, I think, can be valuable, although I know some great writers who aren't certified and some certified writers who aren't that great. So it's not the only thing you should look for, but generally speaking, certified writers are more up to date than others on what's going on in the industry because we have to belong to an association, get continuing education credits and things to stay up with what's going on.
Right. For an executive who's considered hiring a resume writer, what should they be expecting to invest? Like, what is the current price range in the market that they'll need to invest?
Yes, that's a good question, and you will find pricing all across the boards. I had someone come to me recently, and I had quoted him a price for a fee to write his resume, and he came back and said to me, well, I can go online and get a resume for $189. How are you different? I said, well, you can always find something of a different price, but when you are investing in this process, what are you expecting to get? Who is actually doing the work? A lot of times it will be, if it's very low price, a lesser trained writer or someone who is working offshore and just cranking out resumes. It's hard to make a living at $189 a resume. So you have to look at what you are investing, what the process is, how you feel about the person. I would say a good baseline or range for executive resumes would be anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000. And I know that that is a very broad range, but it depends on the person. More experienced writers typically are going to charge a little more, less experienced a little less. How complex is your career? Have you done things that really need to be thought about and integrated, and things that are going to cause require more time to discuss? And that's going to drive the price up. If your career is very straightforward, maybe it's going to be on the lower end. Most people have a range, or a sliding scale depending on different factors. But 1,000 to 3,000 is very common, and I think you can get a very good resume in that range. And other documents typically are more. That's not for the whole package.
Mm-hmm. That's good to know. Any other words of wisdom, any other advice for mid and senior level executives who are looking for their next opportunity at a later stage of their career?
Well, I would say that this is an important stage of your career if you're looking to make the big leap and set yourself up for the remaining years that you're working. And if you are, you're older and you're looking to maybe change focus a little bit or have one last, great gig, that's important too. But investing in your career makes a lot of sense, because with the right strategy, the right message, and the right support, you are very likely to be successful. Without any of those things, you might flail around. You might get lucky. Some people do. You might have a great network that is very willing to, to speak for you. But having your resume done and knowing the message and having the confidence about who you are and what your value is will translate to everything that you do in your search. And I think it's a worthwhile investment. I've been doing it a long time. My clients are fantastic, and they tell me all the time how helpful it was to go through the process and to feel confident and great about what they're going to market with.
Wonderful. Louise, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate all that you shared, and then my clients will definitely benefit from learning about your experience and what they need to work with you for.
Well, thank you, Erin. It was a pleasure.